Hello, BookTube. I watched a video earlier today from David at the Poptimist, a superb BookTube channel that I'm assuming you're all subscribed to, that was called the BookTube Booker Book Tag, in which he surveys the literary awards of 2018 and comes away slightly dissatisfied. Just reflexively what I think so many people do, which is to kind of either mentally or actually jot down a kind of quasi-list of reminders or TBRs drawn from those long lists and those award shortlists and those award winners. But in 2018, more than in most years, I have noticed an element of dissatisfaction with those long lists and those short lists and those winners. And it's reflected in his video where, yes, I can do that, but there's a sort of an unfocused longing for more. And as is his way on the Poptimist channel, he decided to focus that longing by creating this tag, which is kind of a survey tag to try and draw in enough data to develop some sort of award tag for BookTube. But also, as is the way, the Poptimist is one of the biggest believers in BookTube that we have in this community. And he always matches his belief. He always believes that BookTube can do more, can be on more solid footing, can be better respected by the non-BookTube world. And he always matches that with quantification. He is I suspect, a compulsive quantifier. And he wants to do assemble a database from which we can draw winners for a BookTube Booker tag, a BookTube Booker award. His video lists categories, 10 categories for books. He doesn't specifically state this, of course. This is broad open, as broad as the community of BookTube itself. So as he puts it, if your answers to all of these 10 categories are writers or books from 30 years ago, that's fine. But you should know that you will probably be an outlier. I think, although this is broad and open to the whole community, I think the gist of it here would be that we try to make relevant answers, temporally relevant answers, 2018 answers, which unfortunately, if that turns out to be true down the line, either for this BookTube tag or for some other BookTube award, I understand that will necessarily limit the respondents, right? Without any problem. There's no stratification in terms of merit, but some BookTubers deal with far more new releases than other BookTubers. In fact, most BookTubers don't deal with new releases at all. And it doesn't make their channels any less fantastic. It's just for the rather niche goal of creating some sort of award or acknowledgement for a given publishing year, the pool of respondents might be smaller. But that is not the stated goal of the BookTuber Booker tag. That the BookTuber Booker tag is for all of you. And these categories are really good, but they do present me with a problem. I'll get to that. I want to give you the categories first. They are your favorite fiction book of the year, your favorite nonfiction book of the year, your favorite debut novel, your favorite poetry or short story collection, and I guess that could be both as well, your favorite work in translation, your favorite comic or comic series or graphic novel. And again, I guess that could be all three, depending on how much you do in that genre. Then your favorite book cover, your favorite author, and this is classic Poptimist, his elaboration for your favorite author, just in case you were thinking of screaming out Tolstoy, is what he's really looking for here is an author who's alive, and not only alive, but who is working the whole world in which we live. So, not Alan Moore with foot-long fingernails, who occasionally goes to conventions and mutters incomprehensibly in Klingon for 2 hours and then leaves with a heavy bodyguard, but rather a contemporary, normally publishing author who is making use of social media, who's making use of the interconnected world that is totally new to the 21st century. At all other times, you had to go to a reading and stand in line, and you got to exchange one banality with an author, if you were lucky. If you were really lucky, you would go to a writing workshop, and you would get to know that author just a little, or maybe a lot. And maybe occasionally in a small Midwestern town, you would help that author home while staggering drunk several times. One way or another, in the 21st century, that is totally different. You can interact with an author immediately and extensively. You can do it all day long if you want, if they have an active social media presence, and if they do it right. And that's what this is about. So it's your favorite author, yes, and you can still scream out Tolstoy if you want. but I think we all know that if Tolstoy were alive today, his Twitter presence would consist of one tweet after another saying, "How does this work?" in Russian. So we might want to go with somebody more contemporary than that. Then your favorite BookTube video. This is where the BookTuber Booker tag starts to look inward to the world of BookTube itself. I myself think that we shouldn't do that. I think that, I mean, this tag is totally prototypical, and in his video, David says that he'd like as much input in the world about changes to make to it, things to do with it. I don't think there should be any questions in this tag or in the award that comes of it that deal with BookTube, that look inward. I think we should have something else for that. If we're going to have our equivalent of the Booker Award, then we should have our equivalent of the Emmy Awards. And I think they should be separate things. But anyway, in this list of these 10, the next one is your favorite BookTube video, and then your favorite new or new-to-you BookTuber. And in his call to action, I had to squirm just a little, because when the Poptimist is talking about his feeling slightly left out of the long list for several major book awards, and feeling like maybe there was a dissatisfaction with the recondite nature of some of those choices, he partly said, well, and why should we? How did he put it? Kowtow to traditional media when we are the new BookTube tastemakers. We are the new bookish tastemakers, conversation starters. The digital bookish world. The online publishing world, the world of Bookstagram and Twitter, the world of BookTube, which is growing all the time and getting more and more notice all the time. Also bookish podcasts, all that sort of stuff. And that made me squirm a little, because I too am a firm believer in BookTube. This is such an incredible environment of sheer bookish enthusiasm across the board. From people who have just found Mrs. Dalloway and can't enthuse enough about it, and it's so incredibly wonderful to watch those videos, to people who have been reading steadily and broadly for years, to people who, have been doing this on the borderline or in the full world of being professional about it for a long time, and in lots of capacities that go beyond BookTube. I'm a big believer in that. Whatever this gigantic, messy thing is, this huge community that we have here on BookTube, it's incredibly important to the future of books, I think. But I had to squirm a little when he talked about kowtowing to the traditional media, because I'm part of the traditional media. I'm a professional publishing book reviewer. My work regularly appears in the aforementioned traditional media. And it has for a long time. So, I guess I have a foot planted in both worlds. But one way or another, I love this idea. The only problem that I have with it, major problem that I have with it, there's tweaking here and there, of course, but the major problem that I have with it is one thing that if you've been watching my 8,000 videos, David actually makes a little crack in his video about how perhaps I am a prolific booktuber. But anyway, the problem I have with it is that I do an end-of-the-year roundup of books myself. For years, I did it on my literary blog, Steve Reads, and I still intend to do that. Steve Reads now lives as part of Open Letters Review, the online literary journal where I am one of the editors. Steve Reads is a part of that. And in early December, Steve Reads will be rolling out its end-of-the-year roundup, same as everything. I'm assuming in 2018, going on 2019, that I can, if I clearly mark a blog on a literary site, readers are at this point in the game are savvy enough to know, okay, well then everything that's on here doesn't speak for, these are not reviews. If it's got a banner that clearly says Steve Reads, then the blog. I don't think I am assuming that I don't need to go elsewhere to do that. I don't have to go to a different site to write that. That's kind of my assumption. This is the first year I'll be testing that, so we shall see. And I am still completely unclear on what to do about that epic year-end roundup in terms of BookTube. The more I think about it, the more I think that what I will do is run the lists one per day, as usual, as I've been doing for well over a decade. I will run the lists on Steve Reads every day, and then when I'm done with all of the lists, instead of doing, I have occasionally in years past done a separate entry at the end of it all that recaps everything, but without extensive description, just basically lists and a couple of comments here and there. And I'm thinking that what I will do this year is run the list day by day, same as everything. With those of you who have seen previous years will know it's 10 books in each category. It's a paragraph for each book, with a winner in each category, or in the case of the worst categories, losers. And I think what I will do is run those day by day in December, and then when I'm done, I will do the recap here on BookTube, so that you don't have to go and plow through those lists if you don't want to, although why you wouldn't want to, I have no idea. And you also don't miss anything if you miss that recap video. That's what I'm thinking I'm going to do. But one way or another, there's significant overlap between my categories and the Poptimist categories. He has 10 categories here on his BookTuber Booker book tag, and I have 15 categories on my Steve Reads year-end Gotterdammerung of books, which is, I want to point out once again, I almost never do this, but I want to point out once again that my list is the most comprehensive and the widest-ranging year-end book list anywhere in the English-speaking world, including the ones put out by major newspapers and major magazines and major literary journals, which might have the same number of books, but keep in mind, those lists are done by a whole staff of people. Whereas mine is done by one person, and the reading is far wider. I read, in the course of a given year, far more books than the entire literary staff of most literary journals. And I pay, well, as you might have been able to tell from this channel, I pay very close attention to what I read. I'm not blowing through anything. And as a result, at the end of the year, my list is epic and definitive. and my categories are best fiction, best nonfiction, general nonfiction, best history, best mystery, best science fiction and fantasy, best romance, best works in translation, best fiction debuts, best historical fiction, best biography, best science and nature, best YA and kids. In both of those, I will be splitting 5 per subcategory, and best reprints, and then, much to the dismay of the publishing industry, worst fiction and worst nonfiction. So that's 15 categories, and you can see already that 4 of those at least overlap with the Poptimist categories: best fiction, best nonfiction, best debut novel, and best work in translation. So if I were to respond to this tag now, I couldn't do those because, and not for any sense of, tune in here later propriety or teasing or anything like that, but because between now and the end of the year, I plan on reading probably 100 books. And though some of those will certainly get on my year-end list, I keep it open to the end of the year specifically for that reason. My reading's not static, and it's not done. It's still going full steam. Of the 15 categories that I have for my end-of-the-year list, I admit there are 10 entries in each of those. Probably 8 spots on each of those lists are already pretty much solid, unless a gigantic surprise comes along. Because I'm already reading. I'm reading ahead a little, so I already know most of what's on those lists. But there are spots open that will stay open with candidates ready in case I get surprised. So some of these, the 4 categories that are actually specifically categories from my own list, I can't really do. So I figured I would do a version of this tag. I'm going to tag a bunch of people at the end. I'm not going to tag anybody in the video. I've liked the responses that I've got, the ease of tagging people just in the text of the comment section down below, and I will leave links to their channels and let them know that they've been tagged. But I wanted to do the categories that I could do for this tag and then wrap up with with a final strident plea to the rest of you. So I can't do best fiction of the year because that's one of the most read categories of my Steve Reads year-end list. I can't do best nonfiction. I can't do best debut novel. I love doing the debut novel list, and I don't know for sure what form that is. It's not finished yet. But favorite poetry or short story collection, I can do that, and I will do both. And my favorite poetry collection is new selected poems by Thom Gunn, which I think comes out next month. And I don't have a poetry category on my own Steve Reads list, as you could tell from that list that I read off. And that there are a couple of reasons for that, but one of the reasons is certainly on display in this choice. This is a personal choice and not an objective or a critical choice. So I mean, I think it stacks up critically, but it's my favorite so far. I doubt that it will be unseated in the course of the year. But in terms of short story collection, that I can name, and this will probably show up in some place or other on my own list. But in terms of favorite short story collection, I'm afraid my answer is very Steve-ish. Most of you will find it very boring. Some of you might even find it cheating. And that's that lovely volume of the collected stories of Machado de Assis, who's long since dead and has never heard of BookTube. But nevertheless, what an incredible, magnificent volume of collected short stories. And also groundbreaking, because the full extent of those short stories has never been presented in one volume before in English. So that would get my... I know I'm supposed to pick some cool hep thing from Bed-Stuy, but nevertheless, that gets my choice. Then work in translation I can't do. Although I will, at the end of the year, I will be producing a list of the 10 best works in translation. But then, favorite comic series or graphic novel. As I mentioned on this channel, as I mention ad nauseum every Wednesday for Comic Book Day, I don't read individual comics anymore, and as a result, I tend not to follow comic series, since they're all connected now, and they're all big events now, so even when they're collected into one volume, they make no sense to me at all. But I do have a favorite graphic novel for the year, and I am amazed. My 3 favorite graphic novels for 2018 so far have all been non-superhero. If you'd have told me that a few years ago, you said that even one of them would be, I'd have said, you're crazy. But all 3 of my favorite graphic novels this year are black and white or semi-colored, or in this case full color, graphic novels about real people. No spandex, no Krypton survivors in sight. That's kind of weird. There was one on Hannah Arendt that was amazingly good. There was one on Dietrich Bonhoeffer that was even better. Just an icicle to the heart. Just an incredible production. And then there was this one. The least likely of them all. The one that I thought would feel either the silliest or the most sacrilegious, and instead it was by far the best. An incredible thing. I am going to find a way to honor it on my, even though I don't have a graphic novel section on my own list, I'll find a way to do it. But it's this. It's Anne Frank's Diary, the graphic adaptation, which comes out next month, I think, or later in October. And you would think Anne Frank's Diary, that if you gave it a graphic novel adaptation, you would be disparaging it somehow or lessening it somehow, and instead, this volume is incredible. Just incredibly good. Incredibly moving, and also funny. You find yourself laughing, which makes you cry all the harder at the end. It's a masterful performance, so it would definitely fit the bill for this category. Then, favorite book cover? Again, I know I'm supposed to go all artsy-fartsy, but when it comes to favorite book covers, I'm afraid nothing beats this. This is Marvelocity, the collected Marvel Comics artwork of the great comic book artist Alex Ross. That is Captain America throwing his mighty shield, and I don't see how a book cover could beat that. But then again, I wouldn't see how, right? Because I'm about 8. But this, nevertheless, I mean, really. You're going to show me some tinfoil and embossed thing of 2 people wistfully thinking on a cold, windswept beach? Does that equal this? I don't think so. Once again, it's around this point, bing, that David is beginning to is once again regretting that he tagged me in anything. And then, the next one, favorite author, which again is across the board, social media, the whole world of things. I have one name jumped out in specific. Again, I'm not sure if the personal mix is in. That's the problem that you run. That's the risk that you run when you're talking about social media, because you get a dopamine hit from forging a friendly connection through social media. And that can influence your critical judgment. That's precisely why you're going to have to go to Russell at Ink and Paper Blog, or to Simon Savage, or to the Poptimist himself. You're going to have to go to those channels to watch booktubers interacting in person with authors. I don't do that. I even if I wanted to, even if it didn't require putting on pants, I'm not sure that I would, because it fogs things up. And I'm not the first critic to think that way. Plenty of critics that I've known, and also that have written about it in books or answered it in interviews, have said, no, they religiously avoid doing that, because then you don't know where your head will be when you come to review that person's next book. There's no way to avoid it. In the 21st century, the barriers between audience and author and critic are so porous that there's no way to avoid it. But nevertheless, I look at it a little warily. Nevertheless, I do have a candidate for this. One candidate and then many candidates. The candidate that I have in specific is Matthias Bostrom, who much earlier in the year did a book called From Holmes to Sherlock. It's a fantastic volume of the history of the media interpretations of the character of Sherlock Holmes. Just gripping from start to finish. Just an amazing... The story would be amazing anyway, and this author had to know that he could have written a simple, boring trot, and the book would still have sold to Sherlock fanatics. Which I guess was, in the pitch meeting, would probably have been the target audience for this book. But because he writes it so well, its audience expands immediately. And he, I have noticed, is a very friendly presence on social media. So I guess that's sort of what the Poptimist was thinking about. But the broader category that I also have to mention here is every single romance author. These ladies know exactly what they're doing, and they're not worried about being really friendly and funny or controversial or spiky on social media. They don't worry about much. They're too busy working. They're working, writing terrific, funny, smart, moving novels at the rate of about 1 or 2 a year. Whereas you've got these leather elbow-patched, quote-unquote serious novelists that we don't hear about from 5 years. And I'm not 100% sure that the books that are the end product give a whole lot more in the way of enjoyment, one way or another. One way I could list romance authors, for an hour, who regularly publish books. They're regularly working on books, but are also regularly getting updates. Hilarious updates about the misadventures of their dogs, about the adventures, miss or otherwise, of their kids, about the hopelessness of their husbands, and sometimes voyaging into political commentary. And all done so wonderfully and so accessibly. That I don't know how I would narrow down the list to name just one person, but I will certainly, if I remember, I will leave a list of Twitter contacts for a whole bunch of people anyway. But I strongly advise following these ladies anyway, especially if you are a genre snob who doesn't think that you would ever like romance fiction. I was that way long before Twitter. I had my eyes open long before Twitter, and now it's just a wonderful adjunct. It helps. I mean, I think this category, just in general, it helps if you already like the author. If you already like the author's work, then that helps. I'm pretty sure that Matthias Bostrom, that his next book will not be a 600-page book advocating vivisection of dogs. I'm pretty sure that I will be safe liking his work for the rest of his career, and that's true of a lot of people. Not just him, but I'm going to split it between one particular person and a large group of people, one genre of people. And then we have the BookTube specific categories. Your favorite BookTube video and your favorite new BookTuber. This is agony. This is just agony. I watch an enormous amount of BookTube, and I make a point of trying constantly to see new BookTubers. So picking just one thing is so hard. I have a couple of answers here, but I'm not sure that in a week or a month they wouldn't change. I'll plop them down here and I will put links. But in this case, it feels so. That's why I don't want these BookTube related things to be on this list. But one way or another, favorite BookTube video. I'm going to go with Ingredients for a Good Book from MCS Books. His response to a Bookish Buzzwords tag taken to the level of a Merchant Ivory film. So you could easily do that Bookish Buzzwords tag, off the top of your head at breakneck speed without any stunning visual effects. I happen to know because I happen to do it exactly that way myself. But his is just gorgeous. It's just, there's no other word for it. Gorgeous. And as far as favorite new BookTuber, I'm going to go with Venti from Caught Between Pages. I just love her channel. I love her videos. She is, for me, one of that kind of BookTuber where it's a drop everything BookTuber, where you see they have a new video, you drop everything to watch it. So I will leave a link to both those things down below, but it's so tough. It's so tough to narrow down. And that is it. That is the BookTuber Booker book tag. I'm going to tag a bunch of people, but the only thing that's left for me to say in this video is that I'll link to David's video, and there's a link in his information field to a form, a Google Doc of some kind or other that has all of these questions. It's anonymous, and you just get to pour in your own data. And there's also a final question at the end of the doc for further thoughts about BookTube, about the nature of BookTube, the progress of BookTube, that sort of thing. And I want to end the video by urging you all to click on that video, click on that document, fill it out, and submit it. Because I think he's right that this works better the bigger data set we have to work with. And all of you are involved. He's entirely right. David's entirely right when he says this is an entirely new world. I hope that it doesn't supplant the traditional media, since I have dog food to buy. But it will definitely grow up. It will definitely grow up alongside it. Be taken more and more seriously, encounter more and more authors, gain more and more clout. And you're all part of that. So make your voice heard. Fill out that form and submit it. Let's flood him with data so that he can then break it down and tell us all about it. But anyway, that's my response to the BookTube Booker book tag. And I will wrap this up for now, but I suspect that I have plenty more to talk to you about today. So I will wrap this up for now, but I will see you again. Thank you, BookTube.